I'm gonna be showing you simple steps to increase your credit score, all for $0. That way you can impress your bank, your lender, and maybe even your next date.
Wait a minute.
And maybe even your next date.
Yeah, boy.
I'm just kidding about the last one, by the way. Or am I? If you're new here, I'm Nathan. I help home buyers get mortgages through education, earning 120 plus 5-star reviews. And here's my credit score as well. And I'm showing you that because I believe the proof is in the pudding. It's simple strategies that have helped me. It's helped my clients too. So I hope it helps you as well. So here's what we're gonna cover today, the 5 factors that impact your credit score. I think it's important to know the what. Then for each of those, we're gonna cover how to improve each of those factors if you've identified a constraint there. And then lastly, I'm gonna show you how you can use technology like ChatGPT to streamline the process and make your life a little easier. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So here are the 5 factors that I'm gonna write out that impact your credit score. I'm also gonna use simple language here, and I'm gonna try to make this nice and pretty so that way it's a little easier to see. So at the end of the day, the credit score was developed to essentially show lenders how well will I pay back debt. So now let's go over the 5 factors that impact your credit score. So I'm gonna go over highest percentage down to the lowest percentage, which is basically how much does this factor take part of your credit score. So the first one, which is 35%, and I'm also gonna use simple language because I think it's easier to use simple language. So first thing is gonna be history, okay? The next, which is 30%, which is usage, and then 15% is gonna be length. And I'm gonna go into more detail for each of these, by the way. So history, you know, how on time are your payments, how much you're using of your credit, and then how long you've had it open for. So the key thing is this takes up 80% of your credit score. So the first thing that I always recommend, I would always focus on what items of these will you get the most leverage, right? Because if you do all this work and you barely move your credit score, that's probably not as effective, right? But if you do one thing here and your credit score jumps, probably better use of time, right? So let's go over the other ones too. So this is gonna be 10%, which is mixture. And then the last 10%, I'm just gonna call this new. So we'll double click into each of these in a second, but mixture is basically what type of credit do you have? Credit cards, mortgages, car loans. Generally, the more diverse, the better, but again, not a huge thing. And then 10%, which is what new credit are you getting? What new inquiries are you getting as well? So again, remember, this is 80% and this is 20% of your credit score. So at the end of the day, if we kind of use these words and develop a commonality, what's like the common denominator, I should say, right? Which each of these, one word, which is predictability. So my first step is always identify the main constraint out of those 5 factors. So out of those 5, I always focus on the first 3 first because again, that's like the best bang for the buck. It takes up 80% of your credit score. And essentially identifying the constraint is just using the theory of constraints. If I improve the constraint, then just naturally my credit score will raise, right? So I'll give you an example. If we spend all our time optimizing for mixture, which takes up 10% of your score, you may increase your score by 5, 10, 15 points or something like that, right? But if the constraint is usage, meaning I have pretty much maxed up my credit cards, but getting a diverse amount of credit technically would increase your credit score, but not that much. But if I pay down my credit card, it may increase my credit score by 60 to even 100 points, right? I've seen that for clients sometimes where they pay off their credit cards, or a majority of them, and their credit score like literally the next month will jump, right? So basically if I focus a whole year on mixture, I might lose a whole year and really the score doesn't move that much. So that's the concept of theory constraints. So what we're gonna do is double click in each of these and show you if that's the constraint that you have, how we can solve it. So let's expand on history, which takes up 35% of your credit score. So when it comes to history, basically making your payments on time. If we have a late payment, technically that's gonna be on your credit report for 7 years. So basically, we wanna make sure we keep this as clean as possible. Now, I've missed payments before too, whatever the reason is. No one's perfect, I'm not perfect. So the goal is, 1, don't beat yourself up. The other 2 is don't make it a habit, right? So fundamentally, the reason why I make these videos is just so I teach myself and teach other team members and hopefully teach somebody else out there as well, is when I boil it down, it comes to 2 things on why we don't make payments on time for whatever the reason is, right? So generally what I see is options 1 which is cash flow management, right? So MGMT, okay? So what this means is money in and money out. Basically, if we have $5,000 coming in, but we have $10,000 of credit card debt, obviously that's a cash flow management challenge. The second thing, which is just simply forgetting. Basically, you think you have auto pay set up, for some reason the lender, creditor, or whatever cancels the auto payment, or bank account changes or something like that, and the auto payment just doesn't go through. So I'm gonna show you how to solve for each of these if this is the main reason for the history. The first thing that I like to do for cash flow management is go into your credit card app, whether that's like an Amex card, your Visa, or whatever it is, right? Your credit card. And then this is where you want to set up a credit balance alert. So I know I can do this for my Amex and my Chase card. So you more than likely could be able to do it too on the app. And what you want to do is set up an alert, right? So basically, if you want to set up an alert for $2,000, it'll notify you when your credit balance goes above that. So that way you're mindful of how much we're spending, right? So once you set up the alerts, then I would recommend obviously setting up auto pay if you can, to ensure that you do pay the bills on time. Or if you want to do it manually, which is totally fine. I've seen people be very successful by doing auto pay or a manual process, but you have kind of a quick checklist. So I'm going to show you on my phone how you can actually set it up to almost be like a fail-safe, just in case you didn't want to do auto pay and do it manually. Or even if you did auto pay, you have a fail-safe to always remind yourself. So what I'm going to show you is how to actually do it on your phone. And basically what you can see here is I'm inputting, I already did card 1, and you can see that's recurring monthly. And then card 2, let's just say that. And then you can click on this I button, and then you'll notice that there's a repeat, right? So I just do it on the 20th. You can do it for the 25th, 26th, whatever it is. So repeat, and then this is where you want to choose monthly, okay? So then basically I press done. So super easy. So every single month, at the time of recording, this is in December 2024. So then every single month, my phone will remind me, hey, did you pay for this credit card? Did you pay for that credit card? Did you pay for this car loan, house loan, whatever it is? So this is almost like a fail-safe, where if your auto pay for some reason doesn't go through, you can just quickly check your phone. There's 5 things or 2 credit cards that I need to pay for. I just check them off just like this, right? And then they're all done, okay? So hope that helps you, and let's get right back into it. You have that fail-safe method that I just showed you on my phone, okay? So this will help ensure and really tighten everything up for making sure we make our payments on time. So that'll hopefully solve your cash flow management and if you were to forget. Okay, so you might be wondering, how do I calculate monthly cash flow? So I'm gonna show you some pro tips with manually doing it as well as ChatGPT. So stick around for that. So the easiest way that I found is simply just taking 3 months. Again, the goal is to keep things simple. So I would just take 3 months of bank statements. If you wanna go extra bonus points, you could do 12 months if you wanted to. But you basically wanna look for your total deposits and your total withdrawals. So basically go to your bank, download your statements. So I use Chase, so I'll just download 3 months of bank statements. And most bank statements, so again, to save you a ton of time, do not go through all your bank statements and go through all your transactions, add the pluses, add the minuses. Each of your bank statements, pretty much all bank statements that I've seen, will have total withdrawals and total deposits somewhere at the top. Or it'll call like monthly subtractions, monthly additions, or something like that. Generally, they're gonna use deposits and withdrawals as well, but you'll see starting balance, ending balance, as well as like withdrawals or something like that. So basically, there's like an executive summary at the very top. That's where you wanna look and see, like, for example, let's say there's $5,000 in deposits 1 month, and then there's $10,000 the next month, and then there's $5,000 the following month, right? So then what you wanna do is actually take the average, so 5,000 plus 10,000 plus 5,000, take the total average of that. So that's gonna give you a number, right, for total deposits. Then you're gonna average the withdrawals. Let's say it's 5,000, 3,000, and then 5,000, just to keep things simple, right? And then you'll take the average of that as well. So then what you're gonna do is now you have the average of your total deposits and then the average of your total withdrawals for the 3 months, 12 months, whatever months that you wanna do. And then you'll have a total cash flow, right? And how do you calculate that? You simply subtract your average deposits by your withdrawals, okay? And that'll give you your average total cash flow for that period. And that will ensure that you know how much money is coming in, again, on average. So for this particular example, I'm just gonna round the total cash flow to about 2,260. I know that's not the exact number, but it's pretty close. So what you actually wanna do is do not set your alert at 2,260. Why is that? It's basically, if you set the alert there, you're already past your total cash flow, right? So what you wanna do is set the alert, and the purpose of it is to set a early signal to scale things back, right? So what I would do in this situation is do 50% of that number, or even 75% if you wanted to. My recommendation would be 50%. So half of 2,260. So that would be about 1,133. Or if you want to do 75%, whatever your preference is. But the goal is to make sure it's an early alert. So that way you know, okay, the next time that I use my credit card, just be ultra mindful. So again, just wrapping things up with this right here, we're doing the manual process, and then we'll go into how to use ChatGPT and technology. Remember, the goal is to set an early alert. It's just like Jack and Rose in the Titanic, right? If we set the alert at the total cash flow amount, that's almost like Jack is already frozen, right? It's already too late. He's gone, right? But the goal is to set an early alert and say, hey, I'm getting a little cold here. You can actually fit on the board, right? I know it's kind of controversial, but that's why we set the early alerts a little bit low, a little lower than your total cash flow amount. Okay, pro tip, like I promised, how can we use ChatGPT? So my recommendation is if you didn't want to do the math, you can upload 3 months of your bank statements, 12 months, whatever it is, and you can throw it into ChatGPT, and you can use this prompt that I've already created for you. And you can just screenshot this, copy and paste it. It's also in the description as well. So once you throw it in there, then you can type in this prompt. I have uploaded my bank statements for multiple months. Can you analyze the transactions to calculate the total deposits and total withdrawals for each month? Then compute the average deposits and withdrawals across all months to give me a clearer picture of my cash flow trends. So basically, you can do it manually or use technology, and it'll spit out the same exact numbers. Probably a better number, because doing it manually, there's always human error, right? So hope that helps you. Now let's move on to the next section where I usually see things that are impacting your history. So first thing is medical collections. So I had a client, let's keep things confidential. We'll erase their name except the first letter. So C and E, they had perfect credit when I first talked to them, allegedly. When we went through the process, we got a soft credit report. And one of the pro tips of getting started early is you can always get a soft credit report, and it'll detect all of this for you. But C, if I remember correctly, he had perfect credit score, like I think it was like a 760, 780. And I define credit perfect, just anything above 760. And then I think one of them was like a 690. And the reason for that, it was like a $200 medical collection. And the really cool thing is with medical collections in general now, thank goodness, is once you pay that off, like your credit score will they'll have to remove it, and your credit score will jump from there. In the past, it was a whole process. So this is a lot faster now, thank goodness. So that's one thing that is the first thing that I would triple check. If you had like a low history for some reason, but you know that you've always paid your bills on time. So medical collections is probably the biggest culprit for a lower credit score if you were to pay your bills on time. The last thing is, if you identified something that is wrong on your credit, it could be potentially fraud or it's definitely not right, is you can also submit a dispute. So that's our next section in the history. This is very common if you have the same last name as your parents or something like that, or a very common last name. Sometimes I see that with like juniors or something like that, right? So very easy actually is you can actually Google submit dispute for Equifax, and then repeat the same thing for Experian and TransUnion. And it'll usually be the very first one. You click a few buttons, you explain, and then submit. So generally they made that a lot easier over the years to submit a dispute. So I would also recommend that if anything on your credit report is not accurate, All right, let's go over usage, which takes up 30% of your score. So let's first understand the benchmark that I would recommend for usage, which is basically try to keep your credit usage under 30%. So basically, if you have a credit limit of $1,000, and then you can scale this up, right? If you have a 10,000, whatever, right? Is try to keep this below $300, right? And in some cases, we've actually had some situations where someone's at like $310 in this hypothetical, or percentage, right, was like 31%. And they just paid the credit card down just a little bit, down to like 29% usage, and their credit score would jump up like 20 or even 30 points. So that's why usage is a big one too. And that's probably like your biggest hack, but also the hardest too, because like trying to pay off credit card debt when you're in credit card debt is a giant mountain that's really hard to get out of. So it's one of those things where if you can solve this, very easy, but it's easier said than done, if that makes sense. So I know it's not fair, but it's just something that I wanted to point out. One of the best ways to increase your credit score quickly, but the hardest one is to get out of. But I'm gonna show you some tips to increase cash flow, pay off things in a few seconds. Okay, so one thing that I just mentioned is this does improve pretty much immediately, okay? But basically, within the next day or a few days or even a month, if you were to lower your credit usage. Whereas what we talked about earlier for history, that would stay on your credit for like what was like 7 years, right? Now, obviously, if you have a late payment on your history and time goes on, your credit score will increase. But here, if you resolve this constraint, your credit score will almost immediately change. So I would also focus a lot of attention on this if you have high usage. So here's what I would do if I want to improve my credit usage, if I have the means to pay off my credit cards. Now, I know it's a luxury, but stick around. If you can't pay off your credit cards, I'm going to show you some pro tips as well. So if you can, I know this is a luxury, so I'm being ultra mindful of that. So if you wanted to pay off your credit card usage, you would think, or keep it at 0%, right? You would think that if I pay my credit cards in full every single month, that I would have a 0% usage. Now, technically not. I know it's not fair, but I didn't make these rules for credit scores for some reason, and I don't know why they do this, but it is what it is. So basically, if you pay your credit cards in full when the bill is due, what's actually gonna happen is, let's say your credit card, you have Chase or something like that, they're gonna submit your credit card balances like a few days before, generally speaking, to Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. So even though you pay it down to 0, they're gonna submit your $2,000 balance to Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, right? And then you pay it off, but it's already reported that you have a $2,000 balance. So what I would do is actually go on to your credit card statement. So I'm just gonna screenshot and screen share what I have on my Southwest credit card, okay? So you'll actually notice that the opening and close date, which I'm gonna highlight here, is on 10/27 to 2024 to November 26, 2024, right? So you would translate this into whatever month that you're in, is on the 26th of every single month, the statement's gonna close, and Chase, the Southwest credit card that's powered by Chase, is gonna submit the balance to all the credit bureaus. So what you wanna do is a few days before is pay this off, or pay as much as you can to lower your usage. Now, I totally get it. Again, this is a luxury if you can do it. So that's my pro tip if you wanted to lower your usage. Now, let's go back to if we can't pay off the credit cards in full, some other pro tips, okay? So I got this question the other day, about a few months ago, it was about 3 months ago, from a couple, and they asked me this question: if I were to choose, would you rather want me to pay on time, it was pay on time, but have my balances go up, or lower my balances, but skip payment? So I think that what they said that what they could do was, one of the lenders or creditors they had a good relationship with, and they potentially could get the 30-day removed, but really high risk. So this is a rock and a hard place, right? And I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. So this is definitely a tough situation, right? Where both options are rough. And there really isn't a right or wrong, but what I really boiled it down to is what option is reversible, right? So what I mean by that is, if I don't make my payment and for some reason, the creditor can't remove the 30-day late, it's gonna be on there for quite some time. 7 years is the maximum. But again, as time goes on, your credit score would increase, right? So again, a rock in a hard place. So they asked me this question, and Or do I pay on time and, but let my balances increase? What does that mean, right? So basically, I pay all my bills on time, but I can't put a big chunk of money to lower all my balances, right? Whereas this one, I could lower my balances significantly by skipping like a bigger car payment, I should say, right? So rock in a hard place, but in this situation, I recommended this as plan B. Now you might be wondering, what was plan A? So plan A was essentially just a brainstorming session with the clients, and you guys can do this as well, right? What I would first do is almost like ChatGPT, just prompt yourself, right? Or just ask yourself the question and allow space to think. So the question was, how can we do both, right? So like I said, how can we do both? How can we pay off the credit cards and also pay our bills on time? And just let your mind think. And if you're with a partner, just let yourselves brainstorm, right? And try your best not to shoot things down, just jot some things down. So I did this exercise with them, and we just, stayed on the phone for like 20 minutes, and we came up with a few ideas, right? One is, hey, can you work extra overtime? No, we can't do overtime because our employer doesn't offer that. And then I think one of them was, can we DoorDash? I think their car was too old, or Uber. Their car was too old or something of that nature, but I thought that was a great idea. And they were willing to do it. And in that situation, don't go buy a car to go do DoorDash, because unless the cash flow makes sense, but I wouldn't recommend taking on more debt to pay off your debt, if that makes sense. Unless the ROI is really good. And then the other one was, so I got this advice from one of my CPAs. This is something that you guys can explore as well, is going exempt on your pay stubs for just a few paychecks. So what going exempt means, if you look on your pay stub, if you're an employee, is you'll notice that if you make like 3,000, 5,000, whatever it is, right? 10,000, and you'll notice that Uncle Sam takes quite a bit, right? So if you're supposed to make $5,000 or $10,000, you'll notice that your net pay is a lot lower. That's because of income taxes, benefits, FICA, Social Security, etc., right? So if you go exempt, you're actually gonna get a significantly more amount back to you, net paycheck, right? But the downside is you may owe taxes in April or whenever you guys file taxes, right? So one thing to be mindful of is this will help you get out of debt faster, but it may hurt you later from a tax perspective. So this is where on the screen here is you can actually go to this website and estimate your withholdings, and this will help estimate how much taxes you might owe, etc. So fundamentally, at the end of the day, the reason why my CPA recommended that I pass this on is the goal would be paying off debt. Like, let's say it's a high interest credit card, right? It's at 20%. And if you can knock out $1,000 in a year, you'll save $200, right? Because that's 20% of 1,000. But the IRS will take essentially an interest-free loan from you. They'll borrow and say, hey, by the way, you overpaid us, but we borrowed your money for a year at 0%. So you're having this 20% arbitrage. So that's where I would recommend talking to a tax professional first and foremost, and just asking them, hey, if I go exempt, what would my estimated taxes be at the end of the year? Because I want to use this money to pay off my high interest debt. And your tax advisor or your CPA should be able to help walk you through that if they're a true advisor and wanted to help you, and hopefully build out a plan for you. So I hope that helps you. The next thing that we did was try to figure out how can we get more money. So that was that path was how can we increase your income? The other is how can we get more money just in general? And we brainstormed and basically identified that there's things around the house that they could sell on Facebook Marketplace, etc., right? So for them, they bought a ton of gym equipment during the pandemic, right? And now that they're not using it because the gyms are all open, they figured that they could sell some of this stuff. And I think they paid off an extra $1,000 just by selling this stuff. Now, is this plan perfect? No, definitely not, right? But did we make progress? Yes. And I think progress is the key, not perfection. So I think in this situation, we got a little momentum. We knock out $1,000 of credit card balance. In a year, that'll save you $200, right? So if you have $10,000 and you can knock out that 20% interest on the credit cards will save you $2,000, right? That's a big amount of money. So that's something to look into, and I hope that helps you during your journey. So like I promised, we're gonna use technology to streamline the process for this section. So when it comes to usage, I would recommend how can we cut out some expenses, right? So you can go through your credit card balances, and that's going to be really difficult to kind of bulk everything. There are applications out there like Credit Karma Mint that can essentially categorize all your expenses. If you didn't want to do that, you can also use ChatGPT, and I'll give you the prompt in a few seconds that you can copy. Screenshot this or look in the description, whatever works best for you. You can upload your credit card statements and basically have it identify the categories that your expenses are in. And that way you can, lay things out on the table and figure out what things can we cut back on, so that way we can lower our usage. So here's the prompt. I've uploaded my credit card statement. Can you analyze the transactions and categorize the expenses by type? Once categorized, calculate the total spending and percentage for each category to identify where the majority of my expenses are. The goal is to measure and gain insight into my spending habits to improve financial management. Here are the expense categories I would like you to use: housing, utilities, food, transportation, student loans, car loans, other debt payments, entertainment, shopping, travel, fitness, wellness, education, childcare, bank fees, late fees. So I know that's a longer prompt, but I did all the work, so you can just copy and paste that. The goal was to essentially make the categories specific enough, but not too specific where it gets overwhelming. And hopefully you can identify what buckets are the high spending ones, what buckets are not necessary at all as well. So I hope that helps you if you identified usage is the constraint for your credit. So length impacts our credit score about 15%. And basically what length is how long have we had our credit cards open for? And so basically, if you're new to the US, if you're a student that just recently graduated, you might have newer credit. So I'm gonna show you some pro tips to increase that if that's the situation where we've identified the length of history is the constraint. First pro tip is don't close old account. And I know this might be very tempting, right? If you have like one of those small credit card balances that are credit cards that were open 10, 15 years ago or 10 years ago, right? And you never use it, right? Now, something that you want to be mindful of is if you look on your credit report and you have one credit card that's like 10 years old and all your other credit cards are like 2 years old, if you were to close the old account, essentially you would eliminate this 10-year-old account, and now your length of credit history will be essentially 2 years. So that would technically lower your credit score. So that's something that I would try to avoid is closing old credit card accounts. And here's my pro tip to essentially hack not using your old credit cards. Now I know because you want to avoid spending it and things of that nature. What I always recommend is just store it somewhere so that way it's out of mind, out of sight. And that way you avoid using it, but you still have it open. Now, there are some situations where once a year, you may need to throw like a pack of gum on the credit card or something like that, but just pay it off immediately just so you use it once a year or just so they don't automatically close it out. One thing that I actually forgot to mention about closing old accounts is when you close it out, you'll essentially eliminate all the other factors from your credit history or your credit report. So one thing to be mindful of is if you close out your old credit card and you're going to eliminate your usage, obviously, hopefully it's zero, and also the history. So if this is the credit card that had all on-time payments and the remaining credit cards have 1 30-day late or 2 30-day lates or something like that, and we eliminate the cleanest account, that'll definitely lower your credit score. So that'll be like a double whammy where you close your oldest account and the cleanest account. So again, that's something that I would look into your credit report and make sure to keep those older accounts open, especially if they're clean. So, okay, so here's some pro tips if you're newer to the US, whether that's Mexico, Canada, or you got a work visa because you're working for a tech company or something like that, right? So let's first go this. So Amex, I know they have this, is they have like a global transfer process. So if you have a credit card with Amex, you'll be able to transfer your credit here. And I actually was educated about this by one of our clients. And this will allow you to transfer your Amex credit card from a different country into the US and essentially getting you a head start in your credit. So basically, if you're thinking about moving to the US and starting your whole new credit score all over again, I would highly recommend looking into opening up a credit card in your country and then transferring it to the US. Now, what if you don't have this, right? And you're already in the US and, you know, you're watching this or you're a student, right? I would recommend doing a secured credit card. So what does a secured credit card actually mean? So an unsecured credit card basically just means, or the opposite, I should say, is, hey, based on my credit profile, please open up a credit card for $10,000, even though I don't have $10,000 saved up. A secured credit card means, hey, I'm gonna deposit $300, right, into your bank. Please lend me $300. It'll be a one-to-one, generally speaking. So basically, if I have $300 deposited in their bank as collateral, then they'll give me a $300 credit card balance. I would highly recommend doing this if you're not able to do this, or if you're already in the US, or if you're a student, okay? This will give you a head start. And I always see clients that have older credit, just like this one, they're usually the smallest credit card balances. Generally, it's the secured credit card, okay? So the other thing that you can do to get a quick boost is you can become an authorized user. So basically, parents, somebody in the US that trusts you, but basically you can become an authorized user, right? You get added on to their credit card, onto their, you get added on to their credit cards, and essentially you get to use their length, history, usage, all that good stuff. And what I just mentioned is you get to use theirs, right? So make sure it is a very clean trade line that you're getting added on. What does that mean? Make sure the credit card's paid on time, make sure the usage is as low as possible. Because if you get added on as an authorized user and there's a 30-day late on there, essentially your history will go down. And because that's your only thing on your credit report, your credit score will definitely decrease. So pro tip, get added on as an authorized user, but make sure it's a good and clean account. By the way, if you like tactical tips like this, feel free to give this video a like. It lets me know to make more videos like this. All right, so 10% is mixture. So this is actually very easy. So basically, what type of credit do I have? What's the mixture? Credit cards, car loan, other installment debts. So installment like student loans, things of that nature, and then mortgage, and then etc. Really the goal of mixture is to show, hey, I can handle multiple types of credit, right? Now, this is actually a really easy section. So what I've noticed with mixture specifically is I haven't really seen this be the constraint for my clients, and it may not apply to you either, right? So what I definitely don't want you guys to do is open up new credit just to, like, let's say you just have your credit card and a car loan. It does not mean go get a personal loan because you need to add on another one. So again, this really isn't really a constraint, but it's good to kind of know what goes into the mixture factor, okay? So moving on to the next section, which is the new, 10% new. This is actually a very easy one as well. So usually what you're gonna have is basically, so new credit and then also inquiries as well, right? Okay, so with new credit, basically if I open up new credit, literally if I open up a new credit card, new car loan, get a personal loan, all in like 90 days or 6 months, it's gonna lower your new factor, okay? So again, I usually don't see this being a constraint because again, adding up all this, if you had a 0% and a 0% score, the other ones take up 80%. And literally like if you open up a ton of new credit, ton of like no mixture and a ton of new credit, you'll still have a pretty high credit score. So that's for the new credit, and then inquiries. So you're gonna have what's called a soft inquiry, which does not impact your score at all. And then you're gonna have a hard inquiry, which does impact your score. In reality, it doesn't hurt your score as much as I think the free credit apps like Credit Karma and Mint say. There's also articles out there, but when you're doing a pre-approval, getting a soft report is usually what I do, and I know other people do it as well. So you'll be able to get at least most of the information. Now, there are some times that you actually do want to get a full credit report, and that would essentially be a hard inquiry, is especially if you're like on the edge of qualifications, you want to make sure everything's dialed in. That's where I would recommend this, whereas a soft, you aren't able to really maximize everything if you needed to. So that's just something to be ultra mindful of. And also when you get your offer accepted, if you get a soft report and you get your offer accepted, you are gonna need a full credit report anyways. So it's just something to be mindful of. So if you're like kind of in the research stage, hey, I'm 12 months out. One, if you're 12 months out, make sure to check out my 12-month game plan video. But usually the soft credit report will work unless you're like on the edge of qualifications. And then when you get into contract, that's when you are going to get a full credit report. So in summary, for both of these, not really the constraint. So not constraint, right? Because these take up 10%, whereas the other ones like history, usage, and length, that takes up 80% of your credit score. And the analogy I like to use, if we're going to compare usage, which is 30%, and then new, which is 10%, right? So usage is about 3x the impact for your credit score. So the analogy that I like to use is almost like your employer, right? Which would you choose? Someone who's making 100,000 or making 3 times more, which is 300K. Which one would you do? Same amount of work, same 80 hours, right? And most would choose the 300K, right? Because you're putting the same amount of time in the inputs, but getting 3 times the output. So that's why I always recommend find the theory or find the constraint using the theory constraint and focus on that, because then you'll improve the credit score from there. So usually that's going to be the top 3 that take up 80% of your credit score. All right, so we covered a lot of simple steps to increase your credit score. I hope you learned something new. We covered the 5 factors that impact your score. And like I say, I always like to use simple language. And remember I talked about the top 3 heavy hitters. Generally speaking, if you're going to DIY, I usually see the top 3, which is history, usage, and length as the heavy hitters. I would focus on that first, and the remaining ones usually aren't as big of an impact. Within each one, I showed you how to improve each of those if you identified that that's your constraint. And then last but not least, I showed you how to use ChatGPT or technology with the prompts in the description that you can easily copy and paste to help streamline the process as well. So if you like videos like this, feel free to give it a subscribe and a like, so that way I know to make more videos like this. And also, YouTube wants you to watch this video right over here. Feel free to give it a click. Give it a little clickety click. Anyways, as always, I'm rooting for you. This is Nathan, signing out.